Golden Age women with the worst hair transplants. Hollywood's golden age gave us glamour, sophistication, and images of female perfection that defined beauty for generations. Behind those flawless publicity photos and carefully lit close-ups, however, lurked a darker reality. The desperate, often painful measures studio stars took to maintain impossible standards as they aged in an unforgiving industry. The studios created goddesses, then expected them to remain divine as they got older, revealed a former MGM hair. Stylists who worked with dozens of stars during the 1950s and 60s. These women were trapped. They couldn't age naturally without losing their careers. But the solutions available were primitive, painful, and often disastrous. While today's cosmetic procedures offer relatively safe, effective treatments for hair loss, golden age actresses face cruder options. Experimental transplant techniques, painful follicle plugs, and primitive surgical approaches that often left visible scarring and unnatural results that required increasingly elaborate hairstyles, wigs, and camera tricks to conceal. These women suffered physically and emotionally for their appearance, explained a veteran makeup artist who worked on hundreds of classic films. Hair loss was considered a career death sentence for actresses, so they underwent excruciating early hair transplant procedures despite the risks. The results were often worse than the problem they were trying to solve. Tonight, we reveal the shocking hidden hair transplant disasters of 8 legendary Golden Age stars. Women whose glamorous images concealed painful struggles with crude cosmetic procedures that left visible scarring, unnatural hairlines, and permanent damage that plagued them for decades. But first, we need to understand why these icons risked so much enduring procedures that were essentially experimental surgery and how they managed to maintain their flawless images despite sometimes catastrophic cosmetic results. The hidden hair crisis of Hollywood's golden age. Hair loss has always been a sensitive issue for women, but for golden age Hollywood actresses, it represented an existential professional threat. In an era when studio contracts included clauses about physical appearance and actresses could be suspended without pay for gaining weight or showing signs of aging, maintaining a flawless image wasn't optional. It was a contractual obligation. These women weren't just worried about vanity, explained a film historian specializing in women's experiences during the studio era. Their livelihoods, their very identities, depended on maintaining specific physical standards. A receding hairline or thinning crown could literally end a career that supported not just the actress, but often her entire family. Several factors made hair problems particularly common among golden age stars. Harsh chemical processing, repeated. Peroxide bleaching, permanent waves, straightening treatments, damaged hair and scalps. Extreme dieting to maintain contractually mandated weights led to nutritional deficiencies that caused hair loss. Constant styling with hot tools and tight-up dough created tractionolipsia. Add the stress of studio pressures and punishing work schedules. And many actresses found themselves facing severe hair issues by their 30s. These women were literally destroying their hair to meet the standards imposed on them, noted a dermatologist who has studied historical beauty treatments. And when the inevitable damage occurred, they were desperate for solutions. So desperate. They underwent procedures that were essentially experimental with little understanding of the long-term consequences. The procedures available from the 1940s through the 1960s were crude by modern standards. Early plug transplants involved removing small circular grafts from the back of the head and implanting them in balding areas, creating an unnatural doll's hair appearance. Flap surgeries moved entire sections of scalp, often resulting in visible scarring and unnatural hairlines. Some actresses reportedly underwent painful treatments where synthetic fibers were sewn directly into the scalp, frequently leading to infection and rejection. The technology simply wasn't there yet, explained a contemporary hair restoration specialist. Modern techniques use microscopic individual follicular units that create natural-looking results. But these pioneering women had large visible plugs, placed in unnatural patterns that looked exactly like what they were. obvious transplants that often made the problem worse rather than better. The psychological impact of these failed procedures was often devastating. Having risked pain and significant expense on treatments that promised salvation, actresses found themselves dealing with results that required even more elaborate concealment than their original hair issues. This led to increasing isolation, depression, and in some cases career decline. Despite their desperate efforts to maintain their image, they literally couldn't let their hair down, said a celebrity biographer who has interviewed numerous golden age stars. These women lived in constant fear of being photographed without their elaborate hairstyles or wigs, of the public seeing the truth behind the carefully constructed fantasy they were required to maintain. Now, let's explore the 8 legendary actresses who reportedly underwent the most notorious hair transplant disasters. Women whose glamorous public images conceal painful, often tragic struggles with procedures that were supposed to save their careers, but instead created new problems they would battle for decades. Angered. I don't know what they yell about when I won Judy Garland, the star's hidden hairline nightmare. Judy Garland's heart-wrenching voice and extraordinary talent made her one of MGM's most valuable assets from childhood through early adulthood. Behind her carefully maintained image, however, lay a tragic story of studio exploitation that included not only the well-documented forced diet pills and grueling work schedule, but also devastating consequences for her appearance, including severe hair loss that reportedly led to desperate, primitive hair restoration attempts. Years of pill use, stress, and studio demands led to severe hair thinning by age 30, confirmed the former MGM hairstylist who worked with Garland in the late 1940s. By her early 30s, when most actresses will be entering their prime years, Judy was already dealing with significant recession at her temples, an overall thinning that became increasingly difficult to disguise on camera. The combination of factors affecting Garland's hair created a perfect storm of damage. The amphetamine she was given to control her weight and maintain her punishing work schedule disrupted normal hair growth cycles. Nutritional deficiencies from studio-mandated starvation diets eliminated essential nutrients for hair health. The psychological stress of constant criticism and impossible demands triggered hormone fluctuations that further accelerated hair loss. Rumored to have had follicle plug-in procedures, extremely early and crude hair transplants, revealed a makeup artist who prepared Garland for several films in the early 1950s. These were essentially experimental at the time, painful, visible, and often ineffective. But Judy was desperate to save her career and would try almost anything suggested by studio doctors. These early procedures reportedly involved removing small sections of hair bearing scalp from the back of the head and grafting them to thinning areas. A crude precursor to modern transplant techniques, but performed without today's microscopic precision or understanding of natural hair growth patterns. The results were often plugs of hair growing in unnatural directions, visible scarring along the donor sites, and an overall artificial appearance that required even more elaborate styling to conceal. The studio lit her face like a halo, so you wouldn't see the hairline falling apart, explained a cinematographer who worked on several of Garland's later films. Special lighting techniques, careful camera angles, and strategic hairstyling became increasingly necessary to maintain the illusion of Judy's youthful appearance. Close-ups had to be carefully controlled to avoid revealing the truth. As Garland aged, the combination of continued substance issues, health problems, and the cumulative damage from early transplant attempts reportedly created an increasingly difficult situation. Her later performances often featured elaborate wigs or hairstyles specifically designed to conceal both her natural hair loss and the unsuccessful attempts to correct it. What makes Judy's story particularly tragic, how it reflects the broader pattern of her life, observed a Garland biographer. Here was a woman literally sacrificing her health, including her hair, to meet impossible standards imposed by a studio system that viewed her as a commodity rather than a human being. The hair loss was just one more physical manifestation of the toll this took on her. The next Hollywood legend on our list took her famous red hair from natural brown to vivid crimson, with devastating long-term consequences that eventually drove her to desperate measures. And directed with a whole bunch of women. And, I thought I was getting into show business, but I wasn't. I was a grape stomper, too. Lucille Ball, America's comedy queen, and her hidden hair crisis. Lucille Ball's flame red hair became her trademark, an instantly recognizable visual signature that helped make I Love Lucy one of television's most iconic shows. What millions of adoring fans never realized was that this vibrant color came at a devastating physical cost that eventually led to comedy. Legend to seek experimental and ultimately unsuccessful hair restoration procedures. Suffered severe scalp damage from decades of peroxide BL.